Grandma, I'm not clean anymore. I don't deserve to exist. The words, raw and gut-wrenching, ripped through the quiet evening. I was watering my hydrangeas, a peaceful ritual, when I heard it. Not the usual adolescent tantrum from my granddaughter Emily, but a scream that clawed its way from the deepest, most shadowed part of the soul, where secrets fester and rot. My heart seized. I dropped the watering can and bolted inside. Upstairs, Emily, barely 18, lay crumpled on her bedroom floor, knees drawn to her chest, her dark hair a tangled mess obscuring her face like a veil of profound shame. The sight punched the air from my lungs. I pulled her into my embrace, rocking her, but the unspoken terror in her eyes chilled me to the bone. That night, a chasm opened beneath our lives. I just didn't know how deep it ran or what horrors lay at its bottom, waiting to reveal a truth so unspeakable it would shatter everything I believed about my family and the man I called my husband. The morning after Emily's terrifying outburst dawned gray and heavy, mirroring the weight in my heart. She was still asleep when I finally managed to extricate myself, my limbs stiff from the uncomfortable angle of the floor, my mind numb with exhaustion and a gnawing sense of dread. I tiptoed out, leaving her door ajar, needing a moment to breathe, to think. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Arthur hadn't returned yet from his early morning deliveries for the hardware store, a routine he'd maintained for decades. Clara, my daughter Emily's mother, was already at work, likely immersed in architectural blueprints, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift that had occurred under her very roof. I went to the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and stared out the window at the dew-kissed lawn, trying to coax my racing thoughts into some semblance of order. My name is Martha. I am in my late 60s now, a retired nurse, enjoying the slower pace of life in our quiet Wisconsin town. My hair, once a fiery auburn, has mellowed into a dignified silver, and my hands, though still capable, bear the subtle roadmap of years of diligent work. I was a nurse for over 40 years, a profession I loved for its clear purpose, healing, comforting, providing care. It was a life of structure, of tangible problems, and often tangible solutions. But nothing in my long career had prepared me for the nebulous, terrifying despair I'd witnessed in Emily. My journey to this quiet house in Wisconsin had been a long one. I was barely 20, fresh out of nursing school, when I found myself pregnant with Clara. Her father, a charming but ultimately unreliable young man, vanished like smoke before she was even born. He left me with nothing but a broken heart and a profound sense of determination. Back then, being an unwed mother carried a stigma, a quiet judgment that hung in the air like an unspoken accusation. But I refused to let it define me or Clara. My parents, hardworking but struggling farmers, couldn't offer much support beyond their unwavering love, so I learned early on that if something was to be done, I had to do it myself. I worked tirelessly, taking every extra shift I could get at the local hospital, nights, weekends, holidays. They all blurred into a relentless pursuit of stability. My goals were simple, yet fiercely held: security, education, and above all, dignity for Clara. I didn't want her to feel the sting of scarcity or the weight of whispered judgments. I wanted her to have options, to be able to choose her own path, unlike me, whose choices felt so constricted by circumstances. I poured every ounce of my energy, every waking hour into achieving this. I saved every penny, mended clothes instead of buying new ones, and made sure Clara always had hot meals and clean clothes, even if it meant I subsisted on coffee and willpower. And she thrived. Clara grew into a bright, resilient girl, much like her mother. She excelled in school, eventually earning a scholarship to a prestigious university, ultimately becoming a successful architect, a testament to her intelligence and my unwavering dedication. She was my masterpiece, my proudest achievement, and the closest thing to a perfect child a mother could ask for. When Clara was in her early 20s, well on her way to building her career, and I was nearing my 40s, a comfortable rhythm had settled into my life. My long shifts were still demanding, but the immediate financial pressures had eased. It was then, when I least expected it, that I met Arthur. He was a widower, a few years my senior, with a quiet demeanor and kind, thoughtful eyes. He owned Arthur's Hardware, a local institution in our small Wisconsin town, a place where folks knew they could always find the right screw or a piece of obscure plumbing. He was a man of routines, of quiet dependability. He always wore crisp plaid shirts with neatly pressed collars, even when knee-deep in sawdust or paint cans. He wasn't flashy or effusive, but he exuded an air of old-fashioned reliability, a grounded presence that felt incredibly appealing after years of navigating life's uncertainties alone. He seemed like a good, solid man, a safe harbor. He was gentle, patient, and seemed genuinely fond of Clara, treating her with a quiet, fatherly affection that touched me deeply. He never tried to replace her biological father, but rather seamlessly stepped into a role of supportive presence, offering advice, listening patiently, and celebrating her successes. This acceptance, this genuine warmth towards my daughter, cemented my growing feelings for him. After years of focusing solely on Clara and my demanding work, Arthur offered a companionship I hadn't realized I craved until it was offered. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were measured, thoughtful, and often infused with a dry wit. We married in a small, quiet ceremony, just us and Clara. It felt right, a natural progression into a stable, loving partnership. He was not a man of grand gestures, but his steady presence, his unwavering support spoke volumes. He became the quiet, constant backdrop to our lives, a comforting presence I grew to rely on, a steadfast anchor in the currents of daily existence. Then came Emily, Clara's daughter, my granddaughter. From the moment she was born, with her unruly dark curls and startlingly bright eyes, Arthur doted on her. His usually reserved expression would soften whenever she was around, a gentle smile always playing on his lips. He was Grandpa Arthur to her, teaching her to ride her first bicycle in the long summer evenings, patiently holding the seat until she found her balance, then letting go with a proud, whispered, "You got it, Em." He cheered loudest at her elementary school plays, even when she forgot her lines. He attended every one of her piano recitals, despite admitting privately to me that he didn't quite understand classical music. He was simply there, unwavering, a silent pillar of support and affection. Our home, already filled with Clara's industrious energy and my nurturing care, now buzzed with Emily's youthful exuberance, grounded by Arthur's quiet, steady presence. Built a life, a seemingly perfect, tranquil existence. Decades passed in what I believed was serene domesticity. Our house, nestled among mature oak trees and vibrant flower beds, was filled with the gentle hum of everyday life, the comforting scent of Clara's occasional baking experiments, Emily's laughter echoing from her art studio, the quiet rustle of Arthur turning newspaper pages in his favorite armchair. We celebrated holidays with boisterous family gatherings, weathered minor squabbles and the occasional teenage angst, supported each other through life's inevitable challenges, and cherished the quiet moments of shared companionship. Arthur was the bedrock of our family, the quiet patriarch, the man I trusted implicitly, the unwavering pillar of our small world. He was the picture of integrity, a man respected by everyone in town, known for his honesty and calm demeanor. The thought that he could be anything but good, kind, and utterly devoted to his family was simply unfathomable. It was a faith as deeply ingrained in me as my own pulse, as fundamental as the ground beneath my feet. And then, almost 7 years ago, came the phone call. The one that shattered the comfortable illusion, though I didn't recognize its full devastating power at the time. Emily, barely 18, still in high school, was pregnant. A devastating blow, yes, particularly for a family that prided itself on stability and careful planning. We rallied around her, as families do, putting aside our initial shock and disappointment to focus on supporting her. The baby, a boy named Leo, arrived healthy and beautiful. He brought a fragile, tentative joy back into our home, a new life blooming amidst the emotional wreckage of an unplanned pregnancy. He was a beacon of hope, a tangible future that demanded our focus and our love. My great-grandson, he became the sun around which our family now revolved, a precious new beginning. But even with Leo's arrival, the joy was always tainted by a creeping unease, a shadow I couldn't quite place. Emily, always bright and open, became withdrawn, haunted. Her eyes, once sparkling with youthful dreams, now held a deep, unreadable sorrow. She moved through her days like a ghost, present in body but absent in spirit. I attributed it to the overwhelming stress of being a young mother, perhaps postpartum depression, or the lingering shame of an unplanned pregnancy. I tried to talk to her, to comfort her, but she would just shake her head or offer a weak, dismissive smile and retreat further into herself. The memory of that night, the one where she screamed from the hollow of her soul, would resurface in my thoughts, a persistent, unsettling whisper. I wanted to understand, to heal her, but she remained walled off, an enigma. The unsettling quiet that settled over Emily persisted for years, a thick, palpable silence that both shielded her and suffocated me. She was still a good mother to Leo, fed him, held him close, kissed him goodnight, with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. But she carried her sadness like a second skin. It was a silent burden, almost invisible to the casual observer, but to me, her grandmother, it was a constant, aching presence. Depression, dark and heavy, would come and go in waves, pulling her under, leaving her breathless and drained. She stopped painting, stopped writing, her creative outlets, once so vibrant, now gathering dust. She avoided Arthur at all costs. A subtle dance around the kitchen, a hasty exit from the living room if he entered. "Why don't you talk to him?" I'd ask once, my voice gentle, trying to pry open the door to her pain. She'd simply stare at her plate, her jaw tight. "He's not who you think he is," she'd murmur, so low I almost didn't hear her. "What do you mean?" I'd press, desperate for an answer, for anything to explain the chasm between us. But she would clam up every single time, her lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. It was frustrating, bewildering. I thought it was just the residual anger of a teenager who felt her life had been derailed, perhaps even resentment towards Arthur, who represented the stable life she felt she had lost. If only I had listened to that silence more carefully, if only I had seen what her eyes were screaming. As Leo grew, so did my unease. He was a quiet boy, with Emily's deep, expressive eyes and a contemplative nature that made him seem older than his years. He rarely spoke about his mother, and when he did, it was with a mixture of longing and confusion. Arthur, my husband, seemed to embrace Leo with an affection that bordered on obsession. He was attentive, always eager to spend time with the boy, teaching him to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories, attending every school event. At first, I was grateful for his involvement, believing it was his way of coping with Emily's struggles. Even her death later on, I truly believed he was being a loving step-grandfather. However, as time went on, I noticed a certain intensity in Arthur's interactions with Leo. He was overly protective, quick to discipline for seemingly minor infractions, and often dismissed my concerns about giving the child some independence. There were moments when Leo would flinch at Arthur's raised voice or retreat into silence after their time together. I chalked it up to the challenges of parenting a grieving child, or perhaps Arthur's old-fashioned ideas about discipline. He had always been loving, but sometimes, in retrospect, too exacting, too precise in how Leo should behave. No running, no second helpings, no messy jokes. It had felt like old-fashioned discipline. Now it felt like control. I wanted to believe him, but something in Leo's eyes told me there was more to the story. As Leo grew older, he became more withdrawn. He flinched at sudden movements and avoided being alone with Arthur. I began to notice bruises on his arms and legs, which he always attributed to accidents at school or on the playground. But the explanations felt rehearsed and the injuries too frequent. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Leo and Arthur. Arthur's voice was low and menacing, and Leo's responses were barely audible. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. When I confronted Arthur, he dismissed it as a misunderstanding, claiming he was merely disciplining the boy. But the fear in Leo's eyes told a different story. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to observe more closely. I noticed how Leo would tense up whenever Arthur entered the room, how he avoided physical contact, and how he seemed to carry an invisible weight on his small shoulders. I started documenting these observations, keeping a journal of incidents and behaviors that raised red flags. I sought counsel from friends and professionals, trying to piece together the puzzle. Was Leo's behavior a manifestation of grief? Or was there something more sinister at play? The more I delved, the more I realized how little I truly knew about the man I had married. The full weight of that night, the one where Emily screamed from the hollow of her soul, finally came crashing down years later, long after Leo was born, long after we thought we had navigated the worst of Emily's silent suffering. Emily died when Leo was 5 years old, a drug overdose. She'd relapsed after a long stretch of sobriety. The autopsy ruled it accidental, but I knew better. Her pain had finally swallowed her whole. It wasn't the pills that killed my daughter. It was silence. It was shame. It was Arthur. In the days after her death, I wandered like a ghost through our house. One morning, in a haze of grief, I opened Emily's closet, intending to clear out some of her things, and there it was, beneath a stack of baby clothes, wrapped in an old sweatshirt, her journal, and a letter. It was addressed to me. My heart stopped. My name in her familiar handwriting, but somehow different, imbued with a finality that made my hands shake. With trembling fingers, I picked it up. The paper was thick, heavy. Inside, just one page, neat writing. No scratches, no hesitation. It read, "Mama, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know this will hurt you. I didn't want to leave you and Leo, but I couldn't stay anymore. The weight of what I've carried, I just can't bear it. I tried to be a good mom, I really did, but every time I look at Leo, I see not him, I see what was done to me. And it's not his fault. He's perfect. He's beautiful. But I'm not. I'm broken." The man you married, Arthur, he is Leo's father. I didn't know how to say it. I was just a child. I said nothing because I thought maybe you'd stop loving me or worse, blame me. He said no one would believe me. He said I was already broken, already dirty. Leah is not a mistake, but the way he came into this world was, and I can't keep living with that truth buried inside. Please, Mama, take care of him. Raise him with the love you always gave me. Don't let him grow up thinking he's shame. He's not. He's your second chance to get it right. I love you. Always have. I just couldn't carry it anymore. Emily. I dropped the letter. A sound tore from my throat, a primal scream so loud my voice shattered. My knees gave out on the hallway floor. I crawled to the bathroom and threw up until nothing was left. Then I sat there, staring at my reflection, my face a mask of shock and horror, and said aloud, "I married a monster." That's when I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The man I had trusted, the man who had become a father figure to my grandson, was the very source of our family's torment. In that moment, the pieces clicked into place. Arthur's overbearing nature, Leo's fear, Emily's depression, it all stemmed from a betrayal so profound, it shattered the foundation of our lives. Arthur, the quiet, dependable hardware store owner, Arthur, the loving Grandpa Arthur, my husband, and the father of my great-grandson, the realization hit with the force of a physical blow. Guilt knows how to smile. For 3 days, I said nothing, not to Leo, not to Arthur, not even to myself. I carried Emily's letter in the inside pocket of my coat, like a second heart, beating and broken and burning with every breath I took. I moved through the house like a ghost, made dinner, packed Leo's lunch, folded laundry with hands that trembled. I wasn't ready. I needed to see him with clear eyes. Arthur, the man who kissed me every night, the man who once fixed our broken washing machine without a word of complaint, who mowed the neighbor's lawn when they were sick, who tucked Leo into bed and left the hallway light on just in case. I had to look at him and see a monster. But first, I had to be sure. So I watched. I paid attention to what I'd never noticed before. The way his eyes lingered on Leo when the boy was quiet, the way he avoided Emily's photo on the wall, the tension in his jaw whenever Leo laughed too loud, asked too many questions. Arthur had always been loving, but sometimes, in retrospect, too exacting, too precise in how Leo should behave. No running, no second helpings, no messy jokes. It had felt like old-fashioned discipline. Now it felt like control. I remembered Emily's voice. That last night she screamed in her room, "I'm not clean anymore. I don't deserve to exist." And Arthur hadn't asked a single question about it. Not one. The grief that had nearly drowned me began to boil. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. Then on the fifth evening, as Leo was out playing basketball with his friends, I made a pot of chamomile tea. Arthur sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. Calm, steady, like the world hadn't just collapsed under my feet. I sat across from him, slid a cup toward him. "Thanks," he murmured, folding the page down. I watched him sip. He always took his tea lukewarm. He blew on it 3 times first. Always. He did that now, too. 3 short puffs, then a slow sip. It was like watching someone else's husband. "I've been thinking about Emily a lot lately," I said, keeping my voice light. "I still can't believe she's gone." Arthur didn't flinch. "It's tragic," he said, "but some people, they're just too soft for this world." I clenched my hands under the table. "Do you think she ever tried to tell anyone anything?" I asked. "Like, if she was hurt, would anyone have believed her?" Arthur looked up slowly. His eyes were still the same pale green I used to find calming. Now they looked like algae sitting on something rotten. "Some things," he said, "are better left buried." His voice was calm. Too calm. I pressed further. "But what if it was something bad? Something someone did to her?" He looked at me for a long time, and then, with a thin smile, he said, "Even truth rots when it's dug up too late. It poisons everything." I felt a cold rush up my spine, but I didn't blink. I'd hidden a recorder in the fruit bowl beside the bananas. The red light was still on. I stood up. "You want more tea?" I asked. He nodded. "That'd be nice." I poured the tea with a steady hand. My heart was hammering, my palms were slick, but my face, I kept it soft, loving, like always. That night, when he went to bed, I took the recorder and played it back twice. I sat on the back porch with the stars overhead and Emily's letter beside me. The two together, his words, her pain, created a kind of evidence no courtroom could ignore. But I needed more. So I went through the attic. Every box Emily had once touched, I opened. Every notebook, every journal. I didn't stop to cry when I found old baby clothes, little drawings signed in crayon. I was hunting for her voice, and I found it in the back of a floral diary from her high school years. Behind a tape photo of her prom dress were 3 entries. One was dated 9 months before Leo was born. He came into my room again. Mama was at work. I didn't scream. I just watched the ceiling and tried not to leave my body. I think I died a little. "I'm so sorry, God, please don't let Mama find out." The second read. "I missed my period again. I can't tell Mama. I can't tell anyone. He says no one would believe me, that I'd be ruining everything if I spoke." And the third. "Leo is moving inside me, kicking, but I can't look at my stomach without wanting to scream. I pray every day to love this baby, but I also pray that one day someone will know the truth." I printed them out. I made copies of the audio file. I took it all to the police. The detective on duty was a woman named Sergeant Alvarez. She listened in silence. When the tape stopped, she didn't look at me. She just stood up and said, "Wait here." 10 minutes later, she came back with a warrant request for Arthur's arrest. "Do you want to be the one to tell him?" she asked. I shook my head. "I want him to hear it from someone he didn't marry." They came for him the next morning. Arthur didn't resist. He didn't shout. He looked at me once as they cuffed him in the driveway and said, "I always knew you were too smart." I didn't reply, but my silence was the beginning of his sentence. The morning they took Arthur away, the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Nobody said a word. Not then, but by nightfall, the whispers had started. He was such a good man, always polite, always helpful. Why would she make up something like that? And I let them talk. I let them speculate and spin because I had no interest in clearing my name in the court of public opinion. I was preparing for the real one. The detective assigned to the case was careful, deliberate. She interviewed Leo, but gently. She never mentioned paternity, only asked what he remembered of growing up. He was always strict, Leo said. Not abusive, just cold, like I annoyed him. "And your mother?" the detective asked. Leo swallowed hard. "She cried a lot, even before I was born. I never knew why." The evidence mounted quietly. Emily's diary entries, her suicide note, the audio recording from the kitchen that night. A DNA test wasn't needed. Emily's letter was clear enough. And given Arthur's silence and refusal to answer questions, the DA moved forward with formal charges: statutory rape, incest, endangerment of a minor, coercion. He was 70. Leo was 20, and I was somewhere between 50 and 1,000 years old. The trial date came in late spring. The courthouse smelled of lemon cleaner and fear. Leo didn't come. I didn't ask him to. He'd already lived through the truth. I wouldn't make him relive it for strangers. Arthur's lawyer tried to downplay everything. "These are decades-old claims," she said. "There's no physical evidence." But the judge, a woman in her 60s, interrupted her. "Rape often leaves no bruises on the outside," she said, "especially when the victim is a child in her own home." When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt the room hold its breath. I looked Arthur in the eye. His hair was thinner now. His hands shook a little, but his eyes were the same, pale, unreadable. "I was 45 when I met him," I said. "I thought he was kind. I thought he wanted to be a father to my child." I took a breath. My throat burned, but I did not cry. I invited him into our home, into our lives. I said yes to a man who raped my daughter and fathered a child with her without ever showing his shame. I called him husband. I let him hold my grandson. My voice cracked, but I didn't fall. "He is not just a liar, not just a predator. He is a coward who hid behind charm and used the trust of a child to violate her body and her mind." I glanced at the jury. One woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man clenched his jaw. "I cannot bring my daughter back," I said, "but I can tell her story, and I can promise my grandson that silence will never be his inheritance." Then I stepped down. Arthur never testified. He sat there, head low, as if sleepwalking through his own reckoning. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the judge called the room to order. "In the case of the state versus Arthur Benson," she said, "we find the defendant guilty on all counts." Arthur did not react, but I did. I let out a loud sob, like I'd been holding my breath for 20 years. The judge's sentence was clear and final. "Arthur Benson, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole." Then she paused. "But before I close these proceedings," she added, "let me say this. Leo Benson is not the result of shame. He is the result of strength, and he is the victim of a double betrayal from a mother too afraid and a man too monstrous." The room was silent. She looked directly at me. "You may have raised him in the shadow of a lie, Mrs. Thomas, but now, because of you, he can live in the light of truth." I walked out of the courtroom with the sun on my face. My hands were trembling, but they were also free. I had spent years cooking dinner for a man who destroyed my child. But now I had said her name. Emily. This time, everyone had heard it. The years that followed Emily's death and Arthur's conviction were a blur of grief and routine. I threw myself into raising Leo, pouring all my love and energy into him. He was a bright child, curious and kind, with his mother's deep brown eyes. But there was a shadow that lingered, a sense of unease that I couldn't quite place. One night, I found Leo sitting on the floor of his room, clutching a drawing. It was a crude sketch of a man with a twisted smile looming over a small figure curled into a ball. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said it was just a monster from his dreams. I wanted to believe him, but something in his eyes told me there was more to the story. I enrolled him in therapy, and together we navigated the complexities of our shared trauma. Over time, Leo found solace in creative expression, channeling his emotions into art and writing. He had Emily's artistic soul, a way of seeing the world in shades of color and emotion, even the dark ones. Years passed, and Leo blossomed into a compassionate and insightful young man. He pursued a career in education, determined to make a positive impact on the lives of others. He became a high school literature teacher, shaping young minds, fostering a love for stories, for understanding, for the unspoken truths within narratives. We established a tradition called Truth Dinner, an annual gathering where we shared stories, honored Emily's legacy, and reaffirmed our commitment to honesty and resilience. It started by accident. One night over roast chicken and mashed potatoes, Leo, then a teenager, had asked, "What's something you've never said out loud before?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I hated Father's Day for 20 years, I admitted. He nodded. "I used to think I wasn't allowed to laugh too loud," he confessed, "because happy people didn't come from people like us." We laughed, then cried, and that night we decided to make it a tradition. Every April 12th, the anniversary of Emily's passing, we invited friends, students, neighbors, anyone who needed to speak. No recording, no judgment, just a meal and a microphone. The rule was simple: tell one truth, any truth, especially the one you thought no one would believe. By the 5th year, the event had outgrown our kitchen. Leo moved it to the school auditorium. He even got permission from the principal to turn it into a community outreach program, a place where vulnerability was a strength and silence had no power. This year, for my 70th birthday, Linda made 3 loaves of banana bread, a recipe Emily used to love. The daffodils bloomed early, and the pear tree outside our kitchen window, Emily's favorite, was heavy with white petals. The line for slices stretched down the hall. Leo adjusted the microphone stand, glanced at his note cards, then cleared his throat. The room quieted. He looked out at the sea of students, teachers, and strangers. Then he began. "My name is Leo Thomas," he said, "and for most of my life, I believed I was just lucky." He paused. "I had a strong grandmother, a warm home, and a second chance after a lot of pain I didn't remember." He took a breath. "But the truth is, I'm not just the result of love. I'm also the result of a betrayal, a deep, terrible betrayal that shattered my family before I even knew how to walk." He looked at the back row where I sat, hands folded, eyes misty. My mother, Emily, was a beautiful soul, broken too young, taken advantage of by someone the world thought was decent. That man was also my biological father. Gasps rippled across the room. Leo didn't flinch. He held up a faded piece of paper. "Emily's letter. I found this when I was 20. My grandmother who raised me, fought for me, believed in me, sat me down and told me everything. She didn't lie. She didn't soften it." He unfolded the paper, "And tonight, with her permission, I want to read it, not to shame, but to honor." His voice trembled, but only once. He read Emily's words, the raw, heartbreaking plea she had left behind. "Leo, my sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't carry the truth anymore. But I need you to know something. You are not a curse. You are not a mistake. You are mine, and I loved you from the moment I knew you were inside me. I didn't choose how you came to be, but I chose to love you anyway." The silence was heavy, but it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like reverence. Leo folded the letter and looked up. "I am the result of a mistake," he said. "But my grandmother, she made me believe I was worthy anyway. She gave me a name, a future, and most of all, a truth I could live with." He stepped back from the mic. The applause was thunderous. Some students stood, a few teachers wept, and in the back row I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me like a benediction. That night, back home, Leo went to bed early. I stayed in the kitchen, humming a tune Emily used to love. I took out the ripe bananas from the basket, mashed them gently, mixed in the flour, the sugar, the eggs. Each stir was a memory. Emily's laugh at age 8, her tears at 16, her whisper, "Grandma, I'm not clean anymore," echoing even now. I poured the batter into a pan and placed it in the oven. The scent filled the cottage slowly, sweet, familiar, whole. I stood by the window, watching the stars blink one by one into the night sky. Leo had once said, "Truth doesn't fix everything, Grandma, but it lets you breathe again." I understood now. Some truths are bitter, some are impossible, but silence, that was the flavor I'd grown tired of. Tonight, my kitchen didn't smell of sorrow. It smelled of banana bread, of truth, of survival. And as I sat down with a warm slice and a cup of tea, I whispered to the empty room, "The truth can be bitter, but living without it, that's what's truly unbearable." If you've ever swallowed tears over secrets no one believed you'd dare to speak, then I'm here to say, speak and let me listen. I'm not a writer. I don't need a stage. I'm just a woman who's lived long enough to know. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the ones who hurt you. Maybe they told you, "Don't make a fuss, let the past stay buried. Everyone makes mistakes, just forgive and move on." But I say this, the truth doesn't have to be liked. It just has to be told. At Sage Stories, we tell the stories they tried to bury, not to reopen wounds, but to honor the truth that we were wounded and we still rose. We speak for the single mothers, for the daughters left behind, for the wives who were told they were too sensitive, for the children who thought they were someone's mistake. And we grow. We grow to learn that we are not the mistake. We are proof that survival has a voice, and when we speak, we begin to be free. If you're listening now and something aches inside you, maybe you too have a story no one knows. Let me be the first to believe you. Subscribe to Sage Stories, not because I have all the answers, but because I know some questions deserve to be heard. And I'm still here, still speaking, still willing to sit with the truth and call it by its name. Sage Stories, where we don't need to scream to be heard. We just need to begin with something honest, because justice has no expiration.